Hello, YouTube family. Thanks again for whoever happens to tune in to this episode, whether on purpose or by accident. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. And this episode, I'm going to go over just some bits that are in the news this week. And starting off, there was the death of Rush Limbaugh today. And Rush Limbaugh was a widely known radio broadcast personality. He was on television some, but mostly known for his radio broadcast. He's also known very broadly for his very racist, homophobic, misogynistic, bigoted takes on the news. He was very right-wing, very much pushing disinformation. He was also someone who was a rather large liar, and although he didn't peddle conspiracy theories quite the way someone like Alex Jones does, or like broad-based right-wing news media does nowadays, he has pushed his occasional fairy tale in the past as well. I mean, Rush Limbaugh, for his close friends, family, I'm sure there are people mourning his passing today. There may be a lot of white guys in suits shedding tears over Rush Limbaugh's death, because he very much, during his career, grew a large fan base of people who wished they were able to say out loud in public what he said regularly. Personally, I believe that's why so many people watched his show. You have a lot of closet racists, bigots that did not feel the ability to say stuff out loud in public. They listened to Rush Limbaugh, and he said all the horrible things they wanted to say. And for plenty of people, his passing will go unknown to them. Just a couple of examples of the kinds of things Rush Limbaugh had gotten criticized for through his career. Michael J. Fox is an actor who's suffering from Parkinson's disease. At one point, he made a television ad that was promoting stem cell research, because it's for people like him who suffer from Parkinson's that stem cell research hopefully could end up helping in the future. And after the advertisement with Michael J. Fox, where he was showing the signs of the disease he was suffering from, Rush Limbaugh claimed he was acting, that he was exaggerating the uncontrollable movements of his body and his head, and Rush Limbaugh ended up having to come back and apologize for that as well. During the medical reform bills, you had Sandra Fluke, who went and testified in Congress that she wanted to see contraception required of health insurance providers. That way, if you have health insurance through your job, through whatever, the health insurance company is required to provide contraception access as part of the health insurance coverage, and which makes sense. I mean, if you're an intelligent person, and Sandra Fluke at the time was a college student, and you're going to plan your pregnancies, you're going to do good parental planning for when you want to get pregnant and have kids with your husband, significant other, whatever it may be. Contraception is important because you're still going to have sex. And she was called a slut by Rush Limbaugh, among other horrible things, which again he had to come back and apologize for. And so these people that think Rush Limbaugh was just this ballsy guy that said whatever, in the end, he did end up having to come back and retract some of the horrible things he said. I mean, he's said a host of horrible things through his career, and that's why, for me, people may think, you're just bashing this poor guy when he's dead. The guy was very wealthy, lived a very nice life, made a lot of money pushing the kind of vile BS that he did. And Rush Limbaugh was very early on one of the people that helped the right wing to degrade down the path they went that led to Donald Trump, that led to this abysmal place they're in right now, where they're fighting with one another, considering separating from the party, all this nonsense. Rush Limbaugh was an early pusher of that, the vile right-wing Republican mentality that started early on with people like Rush Limbaugh pushing that kind of hate through the Republican Party supporters. Next on the agenda is the status of the Democrats' $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. That is still being negotiated. As far as I know, it's mostly settled in the House. It's going to have to move on to the Senate. And one of the big things Joe Biden has been trying to push through to people is that most likely the minimum wage increase to $15 per hour will not be in the final version of the bill. The progressives in the House got it put into the House bill. They got it passed through the House in the House bill. But you don't have as many progressives in the Senate. And Joe Biden, even before the progressives in the House got it pushed into the bill that got passed, was doing his interviews saying that most likely that will not be in the final bill because Joe Biden started from a position of negotiation. If you've watched what Joe Biden said since he's put out that bill, he's basically been saying he's just about willing to negotiate on every piece of it. And to that, the Republicans offered up a negotiation of 1/3 of what he had offered in the bill, which luckily he did not take them up on. And that would have been a larger fight. But as far as the bill itself, it's still got to go to the Senate. You have Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, the two very right-wing Democrats in the Senate, who don't like the minimum wage increase, who don't like the $1,400 payments, individual payments to Americans, which what they're wanting is much more targeted aid. And honestly, as Bernie Sanders had said in criticism of Joe Biden, do you really want to be the person that follows Donald Trump and sends money to fewer people than Donald Trump did? Which is honestly what it would be, is if Joe Biden lets himself get ratioed to the point where he's going to send out these individual payments to, say, 40% of the people who got them under Trump, there are going to be some people who need money who are left out. There are going to be some people who don't necessarily need money who are going to be left out. But what you're going to get are people feeling like Joe Biden lied to them. And that for as horrible a person as Donald Trump was as president, he sent out the money he said he was going to send out. You didn't. That's what people are going to look at. That's how they're going to look at Joe Biden if he allows himself to get manhandled like this in the Senate. And unfortunately, Joe Biden has that mentality of, I want to negotiate. I want bipartisanship. I want unity. I want to negotiate, to where he's willing to diminish his own popularity in the process if he allows this to transpire. Hopefully, he will push the two very right-wing senators in the Senate, Manchin and Sinema, to get on board with the bill. Most likely, I'm assuming the $15 per hour minimum wage is going to either be decreased significantly or cut out altogether. You know, Joe Manchin, even though he is a senator from one of the poorest states in the nation, in West Virginia, and he has plenty of people in his state earning minimum wage, not being able to work and live, he doesn't really care. I mean, Joe Manchin is one of those Democrats who only cares about the donors who are donating money to his campaign, and those folks are rich, they're corporations, and they don't want this minimum wage increase either. But that's where we're at. It's got to go through the Senate, and right now it's a negotiation with two Democrats who are opposed to both the $15 per hour minimum wage and the $1,400 payouts, individual payouts. They don't like those two parts of it. The rest of it should pass without any difficulty. Whether they'll end up doing more targeting of the payments and cutting out a minimum wage, there's a very good chance something will happen in both of those areas. And also, this week, somebody who's not been in the news for a while, Bill O'Reilly, the disgraced former Fox News host, who apparently does his own podcast now, got ratioed this week for asking where the white supremacy was in the United States. Apparently, he doesn't see white supremacy happening in the United States. And so, as he put out a tweet this week asking about where the white supremacy was, he got answered by lots and lots of people saying, perhaps in your comment section, maybe if you turned on the television and looked at what happened on January 6th, white supremacy happening all over the place, and Bill O'Reilly, despite not being in the public eye so much anymore, still has the ability to ratio himself on Twitter. And of course, this week you've got cold weather and snow and ice hitting large swaths of the United States. Particularly bad in Texas. Climate experts are saying these extreme storms will continue for decades due to the impact of climate change. And the thing is, climate scientists have been telling us for a long time that this kind of extreme weather, crazy, extreme weather phenomena are going to happen over and over. You know, we have the wildfires, the earthquakes, the hurricanes, these crazy winter storms happening in places that don't normally see winter storms. They've been saying for a long time now that that's part of climate change. And we're seeing it in Texas. Texas is a state where you have millions of people without power. The Texas power grid has been in the news this week because of its lack of ability to hold true through this winter storm. You have people like Fox News hosts like Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity claiming, and get this, that it is the Green New Deal's fault that Texas is dealing with their power outages. That Green New Deal, the one that doesn't exist even in legislation form yet, somehow exists in Texas and is causing their power grid to fail. That is the kind of thing you get from right-wing news media, unfortunately, nowadays, is because even their supposed hard news is reporting that the Green New Deal is at fault for the power outages in Texas, and their source for reporting that as news is folks like Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity, but which is absurd. Their source for news is their own opinionated commentary folks, and the real culprits for the power outages. One is Texas is a big state for privatizing power. Texas is a very red state. They have a Republican governor. They've had Republican governors for years and years. They have a Republican legislature, and they have privatized a great deal of the power grid through the state of Texas. And one of the things you get with private companies who are interested in making profits controlling the power grid is that if they spend money to upgrade the power grid, that takes away from their profits. Whereas if they can just use the power grid that was in place when they got the contracts with the state. They just get to soak up money, and it's profit. And that's one of the issues with, and one of the reasons why I say there are some things that should not be private. Some things should be the responsibility of the government, whether local, state, or federal government. It should fall on them. And if it is private, it needs to be heavily regulated, or you get this. You get private companies who are interested in profits, therefore they're not interested in spending money to upgrade infrastructure for their power grid, and you have massive failures. You've had around 24 people already die in the state of Texas, and you've got right-wing news media blaming it on Green New Deal legislation that doesn't exist. And even though there are some environmentalists who have pointed out that there have been, for instance, wind turbine failures in the state of Texas, it's not indicative of wind turbines that they're just going to fail because of cold weather, because you have wind turbines in Greenland dealing with severe cold weather on a regular basis in the wintertime that operate just fine because they've been fitted and prepared to deal with that cold weather. In Texas, not so much, because you have private entities wanting to make profit. Therefore, they're not necessarily going to upgrade their windmills for cold weather that they normally don't see. And the result is you have people in Texas without power, people in Texas without water, people in Texas suffering. And as a result, you had Tim Boyd, a former mayor in Texas, and he was the mayor of Colorado City, Texas, who put out a heartless tweet saying that you got to sink or swim, that it's on you, that power companies owe you nothing, the state owes you nothing, the city owes you nothing. If you are without heat, if you're without water, you got to figure out a way to survive. That's just the way it is, which is absolutely asinine. I mean, and as a result, he resigned from being mayor, and then he went on Twitter. I guess his wife was defending what he was saying. As a result, she was getting attacked on Twitter. Then he went on Twitter and said, "Oh, please stop attacking me and my family." And the thing is, if you don't want to get attacked on Twitter, maybe don't say asinine things on Twitter. I don't know how else to help you out there, man. I mean, if you're going to go on Twitter and say ridiculous stuff, don't complain when people attack you for the ridiculous stuff you say. And former mayor of Texas, Rick Perry, claimed that Texans prefer power outages to regulations. They would rather be without power and water than have regulations that require these companies to upgrade the infrastructure. Which is kind of crazy also. And this weekend, you had the acquittal of Donald Trump in the Senate on his second impeachment. McConnell afterwards made a statement where he was basically saying the House managers proved their case. Donald Trump was absolutely responsible for his months and months of lying, saying there was massive fraud, the election was stolen from a large amount of Americans that supported him, that he was cheated, his fans were cheated. And then he gave his rally at the Capitol, which ended up in a violent mob attacking the Capitol, some of whom had absolute intentions of harming members of the Democrat Party, members of the Republican Party. There were people who wanted to capture and hang Mike Pence, thinking that Mike Pence had the ability to stop Joe Biden from winning the election, which is not true, but was also a lie that was pushed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who's been quiet since he got out of office, came out and started making statements again. He has a super PAC that he started, and that super PAC has, I think, around $33 or $34 million in it still that he collected during the 2020 campaign. And now that he's been acquitted on his second impeachment, he's come out to say that Mitch McConnell is the enemy of the people now. He's going hard after Mitch McConnell, along with the other 7 Republicans who voted to impeach him in the Senate trial. Donald Trump's making it clear that he wants to reach out and make sure he has a firm grasp on the Republicans that are still left in public office. Because he does. He has the base mostly locked up. From the looks of polls, it looks like around 68% at least of the Republican base are diehard Trump supporters who absolutely are willing to go along with Trump when he attacks Republicans that he don't feel like are decently loyal enough to him. And McConnell, having made his statement in the Senate after the impeachment was over, after the trial was over, became target number 1 for Trump. McConnell is going to be in his mid-80s when his current term is over. He just got reelected in November last year. He's got 6 years in the Senate. But by the time this term is up, Mitch McConnell is going to be in his mid-80s. I assume he's not going to run for re-election, but who knows? These guys stay in office, guys and girls stay in office way longer than they should. But I really don't know that Mitch McConnell is going to run for re-election. And in the end, Trump is attacking McConnell, but all it is making sure that Republicans understand that he is still the one that is controlling the party, because he's the one controlling the base of the party. And also this week you had South Carolina passing the fetal heartbeat abortion legislation. And that is legislation that says that at 6 weeks of pregnancy, when you can hear a fetal heartbeat, you can no longer get an abortion, unless it is due to rape, incest, or there is questions about the viability of the mother's life or the baby's life. And some of the things to keep in mind with this is that at 6 weeks of pregnancy, according to doctors, you are not hearing a heartbeat. And let me put it this way, Dr. Aftab, of the medical director, she is the medical director of the Fetal Care Center at Nicholas Children's Hospital. And what she was saying is that at 6 weeks, a heart has not formed, so you cannot hear a heartbeat. What is being heard through ultrasound is a group of cells that are firing electrical signals. And what you are hearing is the firing of those electrical signals from cells. And she was saying that if a doctor put a stethoscope up to the woman's belly at this point in pregnancy, they would not hear a heartbeat. The only reason you're able to hear those electrical signals now is because of developments in ultrasound technology. Before, you couldn't even hear that electrical signal, apparently. But in more recent years, as the ultrasound technology has gotten better, you're able to hear these electrical signals that are mistaken for a heartbeat. She was also saying that a baby is not called a fetus until the 8th week of pregnancy. Until then, it's called an embryo still. And the flutter sound that you're hearing from the electrical signals being sent by the cells at the 6 week point, which is where these bills are targeting, is not indicative that the heart will be viable or the pregnancy will be viable. At that point, you could still have what's called a spontaneous abortion, which is the body itself determines that the pregnancy is not viable and expels it from the body. And the entire first trimester is a time of organogenesis, where organs are developing from the cells that are there. And so the cells, there's a lot of activity, a lot of development into organs during the first trimester. By the 6th week, you can hear that flutter sound, which is the electronic signals being sent from the cells. It's able to be picked up in modern ultrasound technology. It wasn't able to be picked up previously, and you certainly can't pick it up with a stethoscope because, as she said, by the 6-week point, there is no heart that is formed, so you cannot hear a heartbeat. But that's the legislation that's passing, because the thing is, they can get a recording of that flutter sound that's heard on the ultrasound, play that in their local state congresses, legislatures, and say, do you want to terminate this kid's life? This is the heartbeat that you're hearing. At this point, you shouldn't be able to get a abortion. And a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant by the 6th week of pregnancy. And so the point of these bills is to try and do away with legal abortion. That's what they're doing. And the right wing has been trying various different things to try and make abortions impossible to obtain legally. The thing to keep in mind is that just because something is not legal isn't going to stop it from happening. I live here in Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, even though prostitution is legal in the state of Nevada, it is not legal here in Clark County where I live. There's plenty of prostitution that goes on at the Strip you're seeing in the pictures behind me. There are plenty of prostitutes that operate here in Las Vegas, and just because it's not legal doesn't mean it's not going to happen. If you were to successfully find a way to outlaw abortion, all you would do is end safe abortions. And we would go back to the dark days of some desperate young girl with a clothes hanger taking her own life, basically. You have some girls that are going to die because of these backroom abortions. Certainly the embryo will be aborted as well at the same time. It'll turn into a bigger mess. And I understand everybody has their own perspective on this kind of stuff. But the thing is, if you're opposed to abortion, don't get an abortion. You know, if your religious belief says that you shouldn't get an abortion, then don't get an abortion. Follow your belief. But don't try and pass a law that says everybody has to follow your belief. That's where I have the issue with the religious right. You know, you can believe whatever you want. Live your life according to your beliefs. I mean, most of the people I've known who claim to be very religious just aren't. I mean, let's face it. You have these people that are opposed to abortion who claim that they are pro-life. Those same people, when Donald Trump started these concentration camps for the migrants that were coming across the border, supported it. Even though, to date, I think there's been around 40 people in those concentration camps, those cages that we've been holding these migrants in, who have died of easily treatable illnesses. And of those deaths, you've had around a dozen that are children age 15 and under. There was a 7-year-old boy who died. The adults that were in the cage with him were trying to alert the Border Patrol agents that he was sick. The Border Patrol agents ignored them and later found the kid dead in a puddle of his own vomit. He died of pneumonia. Easily treatable, as long as you don't ignore it. And those folks that claim to be pro-life absolutely supported that. They defended Donald Trump putting these people in these situations and that have led to these deaths, and they're not sweating over it. So sorry, that is not pro-life. That is exactly the opposite of being pro-life. But there are a lot of states, because we have a very evangelical, right-leaning Supreme Court, you have a lot of these states that are putting this legislation through because they know it's going to be challenged. It's going to be sued. This South Carolina bill, once the governor signs it into law, there are going to be lawsuits challenging it, so it will not be able to be followed. It'll be basically on hold until it goes up through the courts. And you have other states doing the same thing, passing the heartbeat bill, saying that you can't have an abortion after the 6th week of pregnancy when the heartbeat is detected, which is not, as I explained, not technically true. It's not a heartbeat because there's not a heart. And the whole point is to get it to the Supreme Court. And you have these right-wing states that are trying to see at what point the Supreme Court's going to say this is constitutional. You know, they're going to try and figure out where the line is at to say, okay, this is the way we have to put legislation in to make it where women can't get abortions in the state. And that's where we're at this week. Not a lot of good news, but thanks for watching. Have a good day.